John, you said that the West is deeply committed to the war and they cannot afford to lose. But I would say probably it's the same for the Russians. They can't afford to lose the war. It's about their existence as a nation. So what's the final game? And at the same time, we heard of the talk of nuclear war. The threat seems to be increasingly, I'm not sure it's real, but there's a threat of nuclear weapons.
Well, I think there's no question that both the Russians and the West are deeply committed to winning this war. But I think that the Russians are more deeply committed. I think for the Russians, victory is more important than it is for the West. From a Russian point of view, what's happening in Ukraine is clearly an existential threat. They view it as a threat to their survival, and they have every intention of making sure that they do not lose, and indeed that they win this war. So you have here two sides that are deeply committed to winning, and the Russians are more deeply committed than are the Americans. What this tells you is, number one, that it's hard to see how you can have any sort of diplomatic settlement to this war, because both sides want to win, and it's impossible for both sides to win. This is why most people think this war is going to go on for a long time. Second, there is a possibility that the West and the Ukrainians will succeed in winning on the battlefield in Ukraine and pushing the Russians back. And it will then appear to the Russians like they are about to lose the war. In that instance, there is a non-trivial chance that the Russians will use nuclear weapons to rescue the situation. So one never wants to lose sight of the fact that there is always a serious possibility that nuclear weapons will be used in this war. And it is most likely that they will be used if the Russians are losing. So we in the West are in this paradoxical situation where we are trying to defeat the Russians in Ukraine. But the more successful we are at achieving that goal, the more likely it is that nuclear weapons would be used. And that, of course, would be an unmitigated disaster. We do not want that to happen. All of this just tells you how much trouble we are in regarding this war in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.